Good afternoon and welcome to Praxis Peace Institute's Friday series on Zoom. I'm Georgia Kelly, the director of Praxis Peace Institute, and today we are pleased to host Diane Margolis, an expert on the development of a co-housing community. Diane is a founding member of the Cambridge Co-Housing Unit, where she has lived for more than 20 years. She is a former member of the Co-Housing U.S. Board of Directors and co-founder and director emeritus of the Co-Housing Research Network. She was a fellow at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. She has published many research articles, and her books include The Fabric of Self, which won honorable mention at the first annual book award of the Eastern Sociological Society. She is professor emerita of sociology at the University of Connecticut. Since housing security has come up in so many Praxis programs and discussions, we're beginning to offer some alternative models for our members and friends to learn and tell others about. Diane Margolis is the author of We Built a Village. Do you want to hold that up, Diane?
Sure.
Co-Housing and the Commons. Her book is both a memoir and a sociological analysis that probes the differences between the commons and markets. And this is a very important distinction, which we are going to explore today. So welcome, Diane. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, first, one of the first questions I wanted to ask you is to define what your co-housing complex is, because I think many people have an idea of co-housing somewhere between a 60s, 70s type of commune, maybe. Back to the land commune, or a intentional community that has a strong leader or a spiritual guide. And what you've done is very different than that in many aspects. So I'd like you to just describe briefly what your co-housing community is, what it's like.
Well, it's a group of people who actually got together. Now it's almost 30 years ago in the 1990s. And at that time, mostly in California, people were beginning to build co-housing communities. And it was an idea brought over from Denmark, actually on a book by a couple of architects who went to Denmark to study co-housing and came here and started building it. But most of the co-housing they built was in California. Ours is one of the earlier ones on the East Coast. And the process was to find other people who want to build co-housing. At the moment, there is a national organization called COUS, where you can find out about co-housing, and you can find out about others who want to build co-housing. But in those days, there really wasn't a national organization. And what you would do, and there wasn't as much internet either. So I think the first meeting I went to, we went to meetings by word of mouth. I let people know I read the book, I read the co-housing book. Actually, for me, I was gardening with a friend and I described something that sounded like co-housing. I said, wouldn't it be nice if everybody living in a separate place, we were to get together and form a community where people could help each other and build together and make a community where people stayed together. And so the person I was gardening with said, you're sounding something called co-housing. And so I went out and got the book and I said, yep, that's what I want. And I found somebody else who was interested, and she knew of a meeting in the Boston area. And I started going to meetings. And at that time, there were maybe, a dozen or so different people. And we met at first meeting I went to was at a YWCA, And it was at a basketball court where the person who was running it set up a bunch of chairs. And we sat around in circles and explained what we wanted and what the different groups were. And I was a member of 3 or 4 different groups before I joined the one that eventually became the place where I'm living.
This is really astonishing to me, is that you found out how to do this by doing it. You didn't really have a lot of guidance. Like you said, these organizations didn't exist that teach people how to do it. And what was striking to me about your book is you had these meetings for a couple of years, but then you purchased land, you found an architect, you found designers and landscapers, and had all this done with this small group of people, which is quite astonishing on a lot of levels. And I think one of the things that you talked about, well, that was interesting to me is the values that you come into the community with. How did you decide what the values of the community were, what you wanted the community to be, and how did that play out?
That happened very, very early in the group. We decided that, let's see, we would be near public transportation. That was an important thing. We would, I'm trying to remember all the things that we agreed we would have. We would be self-governing, that was for sure. We actually had a developer who helped organize us and put us together. And we started, they were a member of the Quaker community here, and the Cambridge Quakers gave us their space and we would meet at their place. And we decided that we would have units of various sizes, and we do. We have our units range from studios to 4-bedroom townhouses. And of course, they each cost a different amount. And this would be an ownership model. And we had many, many decisions along the way. For instance, one, I think, very important decision was whether we would be formed as a condo or as a cooperative. We decided to be condos, partly because the tax structure in Cambridge was more friendly toward condos than cooperatives, or at least we thought so. So that was a decision. We had to decide whether we would have one building. We have one large building, which has an elevator in it. And then we have 2 sets of what are called stack flats, which didn't have an elevator. And then we have the townhouses. So we're quite large. We have 41 units. And each of these stack flats have 6 units, and they're 3 stories high. So they're 2 units on the floor.
One of the areas that you mentioned was the diversity that you were hoping to have in the community, and the age diversity, the racial diversity. And I thought that was really interesting to plan that right from the beginning.
We planned it right from the beginning, and we definitely had age diversity. The funny thing about age diversity is now that we're 30 years into the project, all the kids that we had at the very beginning have flown the coop. We have a new set of kids, which is wonderful. But people don't move out of co-housing, or not that many people have moved out. And we are becoming, there's a term for what we were becoming, which is a NORC, a naturally occurring retirement community. And we were becoming a NORC because people were not moving out. And then at the very, about 5 or 6 years ago, we got very, very lucky, and a real live wire came and moved in who had 2 children. Well, she only had 1 at the time, and she didn't want to be the only family with kids. And so every time a large unit became available, she went out and she found us another family. And so now we are once more a multi-generational family. We have grandparents and parents and kids, and it's a wonder. I mean, there are senior co-housing communities, but we didn't want to be one. We want to be a multi-generational. We have not been quite so lucky on our racial diversity. We do have we have a few minorities and fair number of Asians, but mostly we are white. And we've tried very hard to be more multiracial, but it's hard. You have to be able to reach out into the other communities to bring people in. And it's easier to bring people in who will feel comfortable, who can look at you and say, oh, I'll be comfortable.
Yeah, that's a difficult thing. And I think the multi-generational is helpful to each generation. As you said, there are people who can help each other with kids, help older people, maybe take them to places. It's a wonderful situation, I think. And your book, We Built a Village, Co-Housing in the Commons, I think is a must read for anyone who is considering organizing or becoming a member of a co-housing community. It's a primer that describes the pitfalls as well as the advantages of creating and living in a co-housing community. One of the pitfalls that you so clearly defined is the process of decision-making when there isn't a leader. And that pitfall, which has been the bane of many cooperatives and probably co-housing complexes as well, is one that you deal with really well in the book, and that is the consensus process. So tell us about your experience with this model in the early days of the community, how it impacted or affected the community and decision-making, and what you ultimately decided about it as a community.
Well, we started off, we were definitely going to be a consensus model. We would make our decisions at our meetings or at committee meetings, and we didn't actually vote to begin with. We wanted to be a consensus model, and we wanted at first we had the rule that we started off with cards. We had a green card which said agreement. We had a yellow card which said, I have something I want to say about this, a blue card which says, well, I have some misgivings. I think I've got the colors right. But we also had a red card, and a red card would stop the whole proceedings. It was a negative vote. And the trouble with having a red card was that people would say, I'm going to red card this issue, even before it came up for discussion. And it would kill the question. And finally, it was keeping us from making progress. And so after a few years of this, we had a group and we started looking at our governance, and we got something much more formal. It's called sociocracy, which has a bunch of rules, and it does not have the red card anymore. We don't use cards anymore. And there is no longer the red card. And we make decisions where you have an organization like this, and you have to make decisions all the time. And if if one person can red card a decision, then you have it becomes a despotism of the red card.
Right. Yeah, it's like the filibuster. It becomes one person can derail the whole process, which I think it's interesting how you all went through it, reading that process in the book, how it actually stopped a lot of things from happening, or at least in a reasonable amount of time, and how you finally came to the realization that it's killing our decision-making process. And it's one of the things that happens when there isn't a leader or maybe a steering committee that comes out of that. But I wanted to look at some of the other problems that you brought up that I thought was interesting, because there was a group that always seemed to volunteer to do everything that needed to be done. And then there are people who volunteer sometimes or can't volunteer all the time, for maybe they have children, or they're older and they have mobility issues. But then there's some that just don't want to be involved, but yet they live there. So I noticed that one of the problems that you brought up were people, and you never, I think, even knew who they were, who would never break down their boxes for recycling, or they'd put garbage in the recycling bins. And it's like, how do you deal with things like this in a community that it's organized? And how ultimately did that work out?
Well, we have you don't solve all your problems. We still have a community where some people are working very, very hard for the community. And most people do something, but there are some people who do very little. And early on, we did not, again, the voices that said we don't want to have a requirement of X number of hours a month or something, other co-housing communities do. It's not uncommon to require about 5 hours a month of participation of work for the community. But we have not. I think we may one of these days revisit that decision, because we've started something new about a year ago. We started self-managing. Up until now, we had a managing company manage the property, and now members are self-managing. And we haven't done it for a full year, and we haven't decided that this is what we're going to do. But that decision is coming up soon. And we're going to have to decide whether this is working and how it's working. At the moment, there are a small number of people who are doing a very large amount of the managing. And that I don't think is sustainable, because they're going to get tired.
Right. And then if they're not, so I think that's a really interesting dynamic that you're still working with. I'd like you to describe the community center in your co-housing complex, because that sounds like a wonderful resource for people coming together. Tell us what goes on there, what's possible, what it includes.
Oh, well, we have a lot of common space. We have pretty much in the large building, the whole first floor almost is common space. And what that includes is obviously the entrance into the building, the mail room, which is a real kind of social hub. Everybody goes into the mail room at least once a day, and you meet people there. We have a big, wonderful living room, and we were very, very lucky that somebody's father had a wonderful Steinway piano that they donated to the community. And so we have this fabulous Steinway, and we have a lovely trio group that practices, well, that gives its dress rehearsals here when they're going to have a concert. And so we have concerts 4 or 5 or 6 times a year. And it's absolutely wonderful. And of course, we have a large kitchen and a large dining room. And we have a library, so where we've all contributed our books, and we have a library committee, and we can take out books from our library, which we do. And we have a lot of grounds. We have wonderful, wonderful grounds. So we have a children's playground outside. We have a place where we can have meals outside when the weather's good. I mean, this is New England. So the weather is just becoming good, and it'll be good till September, October. So we have the area to where we can play and sit outside, and the kids have a place to be. So it's what else do we have? We have a wonderful vegetable garden. So all summer long we have our own fruits and vegetables. And what else do we have?
Children's area too, right?
Well, the whole place is I mean, we do have a playground, a playground structure. So they have some jungle gyms and seesaws and swings and things, a swing set, essentially. And enough room for, we've had croquet occasionally, and enough room that we could have badminton out there. So we do have a wonderful place for the kids to play, and for kids to play and adults to sit.
Yeah, it sounds like a wonderful place. And before I open it up for questions from the audience, I'd like you to describe what you consider some of the best advantages of being in a co-housing community to us.
Oh, I think the best advantage is that there are people around who you know and who know you, and and we've been known to each other now for 20 or 30 years. So we're all friends. Not that we love each other, all of us. I mean, some people get on better than other people. But it's, we have friends. As we've been getting older, we have a group that meets once a week called Aging in Common. And we just get together and check up notes and make sure everybody's fine, and that's a good way to meet. We've had a book group that meets, I think, once a month, and talks about it's an interesting book group. Instead of reading the same book, we gather and we tell each other what we've been reading. Mm-hmm. So that was a good book group. And of course, the parents get together, and the kids are like, they get out every day and play with each other, because as it happened, the ones who all moved in at the same time are roughly the same age. So they're all between about 3 and 7 or 8. So they're all within a few years, and they're like a bunch of cousins. They play with each other every day. And it's a great group.
Yeah, it sounds really lovely. I mean, the whole process of living in a community with people that you've known a long time, or that you develop relationships with because they're there too. And they have similar values to what you have.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to open it up if people want to ask some questions. This would be the time to do that. Usually it takes a minute or so before people hands up.
We didn't talk much about the decisions we had to make along the way, of many times choosing between whether we will do things in common or do things as a commodity, whether these homes will be commodities or whether they will be something we will have in common. And to some extent, they have to be commodities. We had to be able to buy them. We had to buy the land on a commodity market. But we try to also, all of our common spaces are a very important part of our homes, and those remain our commons.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's just really nice.
Yes.
Do we have some comments, questions from people?
Questions?
Yeah, you can unmute if you're about to ask a question.
Well, I was just wondering, real quick, somehow I missed a couple things, but where is this? How many places is this? Like in this country? Is it in other countries? Just here, or
Oh,
just New England? Or?
right now, well, it started in Denmark and it's becoming slowly worldwide. But in the United States, there are 160 of them now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there is the national organization Co-Housing US. And so we do keep track of different communities. The communities range in size usually from about 20 to 40 units, families. And there are a lot in California, a lot on the West Coast. The East Coast is building up, mostly in the North, but a few are getting built in the South. And there's one in Gainesville, Florida. So, yeah, and they're all over the country now.
And we have one in Sonoma County. There's one in Santa Rosa.
Right.
There's also one in Oakland. There's one in Sacramento that's a long time been going. I mean, it was going already in probably the 80s. So they're all around. We just don't hear much about them, unfortunately, which is really great we have you on today, Diane, because we can hear about them.
Well, yeah.
Diane's is in Cambridge, Massachusetts, for those who came in late.
And there are two here in Cambridge.
Oh, there are?
Yeah, there are two. There's one about a mile away. And there are about 6 in Massachusetts, 2 or 3 in Maine, so quite a few in New England now.
The one that's near you, how does it differ from yours?
How does it differ? Wow, I don't know that it differs that much. It's a different place. It meets, it got built as the way we built. Actually, they started before we did, and they used our facilities to meet after we built, and they didn't get built till we got built very quickly because we had a developer help us and guide us, and it took them longer. But they did well. And
are they as large as you are?
Yeah, they're about the same size, maybe a little smaller, but we don't do that much together. We have had meetings with them and been over there. And actually a member of their community we've had a big construction job. We've had trouble with our drainage. And one of their members is an architect, and we hired him. And so he knows co-housing.
And do you hire people to do landscaping and gardening and cleaning of the community space, or or does the community expect volunteers to do that?
Let's see, it depends what it is. We do have a cleaning service come in once a week and clean the common house, the common areas in the common house. We were doing it ourselves for a while.
Not good.
It didn't work. I mean, some people, again, did a lot of it. And what we did early on is everybody was supposed to adopt a space and take care of their space. And some people did adopt their space and did take care of it. but there were a lot of spaces that went as orphans until finally we hired somebody who comes in once a week. Our garden, our vegetable garden, we got very lucky. That young woman who came with her children, her father moved in down the block, and he's a great gardener, and he just comes in. He doesn't live here, but he volunteers, and he helps us a lot. And we have gardeners, so we do have the gardener. We don't hire that out. We don't hire most. I mean, if it's something that needs to be done, like a roofing job, we have to hire roofers.
Right.
Now,
is there a common place like a funding, like I guess like condominium complexes often have a fee for the grounds or a fee for fixing things?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How much is it?
It depends on the size of your unit.
Mm.
So I have a 3-bedroom unit, and it just went up, so it's about $1,100 or $1,200 a month.
Okay. And that takes care of hiring people who do the outside work.
Yeah, and hiring people who do the things. Yeah, I mean, we just had this, as I say, this enormous job because we had problem with our foundation and had to really go in and rebuild the foundation, and that costs a huge amount of money. Yeah. And we just had to replace our elevator, and these are very expensive things, and obviously we don't do those things ourselves. I mean, we're not elevator experts.
No, and I noticed that early on there was a controversy about whether you would have elevators in the stacked building, and some people really wanted it, others thought it was an unnecessary expense, but in hindsight, wouldn't it have been better to have elevators in that building?
I think so. I think that there may be different ideas about that. I think it probably would have been easier to have elevate, but then that would have been 3 elevators, and we own, and it's expensive to have an elevator for 4 units.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So what we did was we put in stair chairs for those.
Yeah, right.
Stair chairs aren't the same as an elevator. I mean, if you're in a wheelchair,
it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
There are a lot of decisions to make in creating something like this. Are there any co-housing complexes that you know of that existing condos or townhouses have been taken over by a group, or is it always creating it from the ground up?
No, there is. It's called retrofit co-housing.
Mm-hmm.
There have been retrofit communities, especially I think in California, that some of them have been, where there's 1 or 2 where they were already kind of had a common backyards. Mm-hmm. that were fenced, and they took the fences down and made a co-housing community out of that. So it is possible to have a retrofit co-housing community.
Yeah, it's definitely. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Louise.
Well, I want to tell you all about the one I live in, which is not what this book tree is. This is a photograph, but I live in one of the 4 co-housing communities in Oakland, California. And one of them is totally retrofit. This one, another one is retrofit in an old factory. Another one is houses put together with the fences removed. And ours, which is called Temescal Commons Co-housing, has a beautiful website. It was started about 20, well, 20, we were about to have our 20th anniversary at the time the pandemic began. So it's about 22 years old. And it started with a little farmhouse that was in this neighborhood where it was an Italian farmer and there was a lot of open space. And then they built in, had a really good designer, I wasn't here then, built in around the barn, around the farmhouse. They lifted up the farmhouse, made 2 units of it. It's a small co-housing with a lot of new buildings. And there are 9 units.
Wow.
It was started, which makes it a lot easier to love everyone. Because you can really take time with each person. And, you know, everybody has a story. And besides, these people all got together in the first place because of a common interest. They were part of a church. They wanted to raise their children in the city, living modestly, and take steps to live sustainably. So they put in solar. Most people in this community, their electrical bills are $10
Wow.
a month, which is wonderful. And you can do that in California. So that they were part of a church. So they actually put prayers in the walls when they were building the new buildings. Not, you know, sectarian prayers or anything, but just about love and community. And the thing that they say is their theme is radical hospitality.
Wow.
Oh, that,
They set aside a unit to be used for Section 8 housing. And they there are many in this church that they were part of, there are many multiracial or biracial marriages. So that a lot of the children are biracial, or some of them are grown and gone to college now and graduating from college. But I'm the oldest person, I'm 85. There's a 3-year-old. So we have quite a range. And we let's see, there were many things that were different. We have linked up with a group in Oakland, in the East Bay, called it's the People of Color Affordable Housing Network. And they were finding that because of they started this network because they were finding that groups like ours weren't comfortable for them or affordable for them. So we've linked up with the one that's here, and they've used our space a little bit, and we try to share information when we can about these things. And we have a pretty diverse, I would say, a pretty diverse membership of our, and there are like 25 people. And
Can you put the name of your
the
community?
name of ours is Temescal Commons Co-housing.
Got it.
There's also a Temescal Creek co-housing a few blocks away. Temescal is our neighborhood. It means sweat lodge in Spanish.
And so it's just Temescal.
Temescal, ours is Temescal Commons co-housing. And if I were more clever with my hands.
I'm putting it into the chat box.
Okay, there's a super website. And we do not have we do have expectations about work, but when people are infirm, or they've even been giving me like a pass on cooking common meal dinner because I'm 85 and I can't lift the pots, and but I do a lot of work in the vegetable garden. I think we all just have an ethos that we want to do our share.
Mm-hmm.
Even if someone's sick and can't, they feel bad about it. So I think we also have a couple of rental units. I'm in a rental unit. So I don't know how much everybody's paying for into the common fund, because my landlord pays it.
Well, that was another question I had for actually both of you, maybe, is first of all, Diane, are there rentals in your complex?
well, what's happened is that some people have rented part of their units. If they have say a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom, they've rented out 1 bedroom. But we don't have any rental units per se, or any that are rented from the community. We do have 2 guest rooms, but that's different.
That's in the common building.
That's in the common building, yes. But there are quite a few renters. I mean, I think close to half a dozen. But they're renting a room from somebody else.
And it sounds different in your complex, Louise.
Well, ours is strange because the group that started this, the building that I'm living in was added in afterwards to be part of the community. It was not built as part of the community, and it has 3 units in it. And the person who bought it rents the other 2 to me and another person. So that's how that happened. It was kind of a grandfathering effect.
Very interesting. So creative, the different possibilities with creating co-housing. There isn't just a one model fits all. That's what I'm finding so interesting.
That's definitely true. I mean, if you go across the country, there are quite a large number of different ways of doing it. I mean, there are the senior co-housing, the retrofit co-housing. A group gets together and decides what it wants to be, and it decides.
Yeah, very interesting. Do any other people want to chime in here? We're kind of getting into our own little discussion.
Yes.
But I don't want to keep anyone out from.
Curious about one. As you're speaking, and you're both talking about it in great detail and everything, I'm just trying to figure out the exact differences between a regular. I mean, I can see some of it, but I don't really get all of it. Like a regular, say, my wife and I are in a bunch of townhouses. There's a bunch of them. It's like 60, 65. And there's certain rules, and people do get together and they have these meetings. It's an HOA, homeowners association. And they do clean up and do all kinds of things like that. But also the rules, I was wondering how the rules are in a place like that. Like here, there's certain rules, of course, and it's like you can't, your place, you can't have like a weird picture that everybody can see in your window, that type of thing. I mean, they just don't let you do that, or some bizarre kind of draperies hanging. We have these like large windows. They're quite large. I mean, it's actually 3 floors. All of them, every one of them. And because it's got to look a certain way, there's an architectural committee and a landscape committee, and this, probably other committees I don't even know about. But I'm wondering how it's different from co-housing. Yours seems more like community, almost like a hippie kind of thing in the old days, where people actually get together and help each other out and really party together or whatever. But this is not like that in Mill Valley, I have to say. But I'm just curious, if you can delineate some of those sort of the cultural feel of the whole thing.
Right.
Thanks.
Well, certainly things are different because of COVID. I mean, that really put a damper on a lot of our community activities. We used to have about 3 meals a week. We would have a Monday night pizza potluck where we'd order in pizza, and some people would bring potluck and some people would have the pizza. And then we'd have 1 meal during the week, usually Thursday night, where we would cook it. And so we would have the meal there. And then we'd have a Sunday morning brunch or something. So by eating together, then came COVID and we stopped eating together. And it has not been quite as good. So one of the things is we eat together, which I think in an ordinary condo you don't do. And if you're eating together, then you're getting to know each other. You're getting to know what you do, and you're talking while you're eating. I mean, the whole eating thing is talking. As far as the rules, we make our own rules. I mean, there's no management group telling us what to do. We're the management. So We have meetings once a month. We have we have a board meeting, and we have a large, I wish I were downstairs, I'd show you our organizational chart. We have a large number of committees, and we have a committee for the inside of the buildings, and a committee for the outside of the buildings, and a committee for a committee that decided on what our values are. So we had a whole list of things that we pretty much agree on, that, and the whole point of it is to make a community. So we try to help each other out.
Yeah, it's the difference between the isolated individuals and the community. Maybe it's what you call the difference between the commons and the market way of looking at it.
Well, if you have a commons, then you have a sense of belonging.
Mhm.
Group. It's not just you're there with your apartment and you have to follow the rules of a management company. There is no management company, it's you.
Yeah.
And we have rules, we have a bunch of rules, but we made them. And if you don't like them, you can try and get the community to change them.
Or you can move.
Well, there isn't that much. I mean, there's a little bit of moving out, but we started moving in at the turn of the century, right around 2000. And 2/3 of us are still here.
Mhm. That speaks well of what you've created.
Yeah, people aren't really moving out. And I mean, we have lost people. Unfortunately, the longer we keep going, we do lose people because they do die.
That's shocking.
Yes.
We don't like that.
No, we
Like
don't.
that reason.
Well, we don't like it, but it happens. And the older we get, the more it's going to happen. I mean,
Why it's good having younger people in there too. I think the way you've designed it from the beginning and then learned along the way what was working, what wasn't working, and that ability to adapt, the flexibility that keeps it evolving. It reminds me a little bit of course, where I've gone many times to the Mondragon cooperatives in Spain, where they're never stuck with a rule. They say, okay, that's working, but if all of a sudden it's not working, then they revisit it, they change it. And it's that ability to be flexible that keeps them thriving, growing, and you see no end in sight from something that has that kind of flexibility. It's not a top-down thing, it's a democratic process.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's definitely not top down. I don't think anybody feels it is, because there are people who take a more active role than other people, and they have more power in the decision-making process, partly because they're
Involved.
busy. They're involved and busy. And if you want to have an important place in the decision-making process, well, you get involved.
Get more active.
Get more active and do something and talk to your neighbors and figure out how to do it. And we are changing. I mean, we just went into a self-management process, and we're having to decide how we're going to do that and whether it's going to work. And I think it's working well, but it is also depending on a small number of people working very, very hard. So
another thing I'm noticing, but hearing both you and Louise, is that those of us who are getting on in years, that it's also when there's multi-generational like this, there's it seems like it keeps people youthful. their minds active. I think you're in better shape because of it, mentally, physically, probably.
I think we are, yeah. And I think it's just wonderful to have your neighbors right around and to be, be talking to them all the
Right.
time. I hope we're going to get back into the meals
Soon.
soon.
You
Now
can
that
start with outdoors since it's getting warm.
exactly. I think we will this summer.
I've got one question I'm going to take, and then we're probably going to end shortly. But Alana, you want to ask something?
Yeah, Diane, I was curious.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the community building. I just wondered, does this impact your socializing outside of the community or people coming from the outside into the community? Or is it really no different than living in a non-co-op situation?
You do keep your friends that you had when you moved in. I mean, some of the people, okay, not everybody, when we have meals together, that's a community meal. But we also invite people into our units. And then, and we mix our co-housing friends with our invited friends. And, the friends we had before co-housing, and we still have them. So yeah, there are people in co-housing who are closer than others. We kind of know who's friends with whom, in addition to the meals. And there are people who take trips together. So there are friendship groups within the community. There are friendship groups, and as well as just community. So yes, because you can't be close to 40 different people, or actually 60, because we're a fairly large community.
Right, you're one of the bigger ones, from
Yeah.
what I understand.
Yeah.
I wanted to see if there's anything, last thing you want to say. And before we end, I also want to remind people again about your book, which I think is extraordinary and really useful for anyone thinking about co-housing or becoming part of it. It's called Built a Village, Co-housing and the Commons, which is available at our bookstore readers, and it can be ordered from there if they don't have enough. And she's showing it right now. Do you want to say something? Because we don't see you on this big screen unless you're talking.
Oh, really? I have to say something.
Yeah, any last words you want to tell us before we finish the program?
Go buy the book, read it, enjoy it. You can always ask me questions if you want. I'm on the internet. Yeah. The more people buy it and read it, the better.
It's a very readable story. It's fun and it's very engaging. So I highly recommend it. Plus, you learn a lot about the whole co-housing process from the ground up, from the beginning to securing land to actually creating the community. So at this point, I'm going to stop the recording. And
well, thank you very much for inviting me and for having me. I didn't know about your group, but I would like to be a member of it.
Well, wonderful. That's nice to hear. So thank you so much, Diane. I will be in touch with you after, and I'll send you the link, as everyone on this call will get the link for the recording this evening. So thank you for that.